The order of the wines, if you're interested, they will taste them in the order that they were in the club. So, and then we had the two special wines at the end, which were the Jufark and the Kadarka. So that'll be the order of them. Not, and if you don't want to open up, obviously, if you don't want to open them all now, we'll share a recording of this afterward, where it's complete with the sort of the breakdown there at the beginning. So let me go to the
YouTube
wine here. Yeah. Which is the 2018 Domaine Tohani. I think I'm not sure who has this one, but
yeah. So I can jump in and tackle this wine. Yeah. So I was just starting to say there. So 2018 Domaine Tohani Fetească Neagră. It's kind of a mouthful. This is from the Dealu Mare DOC appellation in Romania. So Romania, the heart, geographical heart, historical heart of Dacia, ancient Dacia, and the wines being grown there obviously were talked about going back to the Roman times. We definitely reference those in the write-ups there. And this is a really interesting wine. I think it's a wine in a style that you really don't see here in the United States, and that basically no one makes this style of wine. And that is, it's a red wine. It's rich, soft, but there's actually a touch of sweetness to it. And you probably pick that up more on the finish than on the nose. There's a lot of kind of interesting spice character to it. And this is coming from the Fetească Neagră and also how they produce this wine. This kind of like, I mean, you could say it's essentially off dry. It has a little touch of residual sugar there. It's a wine that is actually, let's see, grab the bottle here just so. It's a wine that's is perfect with anything that has actually a little bit of spice. So like think like goulash, think something that has a lot of paprika, a lot of kind of either more kind of bold, spicy flavors. It's perfect with that sort of cuisine. You really don't see the style, like I said, in the United States, or really actually in most of Western Europe. Typically, it's a style that you'll see in Eastern Europe and also in the Republic of Georgia as well, where it's known as Kinzmarauli a lot of times, where you see this kind of like lightly sweet red wine. Again, a lot of folks, they'll try these wines and they go, what do I do with this kind of semi-sweet sort of red? Is it a dessert wine? Is it a table wine? These are questions that come up a lot with these types of wines. You can drink it on its own, but it also, again, stands up really nicely to a wide range of kind of heartier cuisine, as well as hard cheeses as well. Anything with a lot of salt is going to stand up nicely to a little bit of that sweetness there. But yeah, I always love exploring this type of wine because you don't, again, so rare, you don't see it very often. You see it from Republic of Georgia, Czech Republic, Moldova. Occasionally you'll see it in places like Bulgaria, but it's actually, it's kind of unique. It's nice to have that kind of departure from just kind of your standard red wine. It's a little bit more of a little more exotic in that way.
Yeah, the sweetness is really not overpowering. It's not saccharine. It's not, cloying at all. It's really something that's integrated really nicely into the wine and makes it really accessible. I wonder if you could chill this even.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would serve this actually a little chilled.
Yeah.
And I think this is the type of red wine, a lot of people ask like, oh, if I'm having like South Asian food, Korean food, Vietnamese food, Thai food, like, but I like red wines. I don't want to drink a Riesling or white wine because I'm not a white wine drinker. This is a wine that would really work well for that type of ethnic cuisine.
Like a duck red curry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, killer. Yeah,
or like larb or something. Yeah. If you want a red wine with your like Asian food,
And the grape Fetească Neagră, so that is kind of becoming, if not already, one of the sort of flagship grapes of Romania. As Romania rebuilds its wine industry after basically suffering under communism for many, many, many years, suffering under hundreds of years of oppression under Ottoman Turkish rule, going back farther and farther. The country is really kind of working to reestablish itself and reestablish its prominence in the European wine scene. There's some great producers like Domaine Tohani here that are making really, really great value, really kind of unique and really at their core Romanian or Dacian in our case wines that are they're wonderful wines for the price, I think, a lot of times too, and also just really interesting. There's a lot of a lot of good things happening there with a new generation of winemakers. Whereas in the last 100 years, there were big co-ops, big kind of collectivized sort of efforts, and a lot of international varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir, Merlot, which we love these grapes, but they're finding that now that going back to what is a Romanian wine, what is a Romanian grape, is actually going to be, I think, a major selling point and the future for them. So we're kind of actually just sort of starting the new golden age of Romanian wine.
Yeah.
And I think Fetească Neagră will be at the heart of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think Romania is where Greece was maybe 20 years ago when Greece entered into the international wine market. Of course, Robert Parker and Parker Points were very important. And so as a result, people were blending indigenous varieties. In Greece, it was Negro Maro. In Romania, it's Fetească Neagră with, like, say, Cabernet Sauvignon. And we actually tasted some of those blends. But now I think with the less influence of points, I think people are really, as Ryan was saying, just harkening back to what is Romanian wines, what goes well with our food, and what's unique about our region, terroir, varieties that we can bring to the international market. So as I think going forward, Romanian wines it's gonna be a really exciting region, just in the way that Georgia has, like, captured the hearts and minds of young Psalms in New York and the Bay Area. And
I also would say that Romania is, most of you probably know the geography, but it's a big country. It's a very large place, and there is a lot of vineyards there. A lot of that wine has been exported to Russia over the last 20, 30 years, hence there's the communist connection there. But you're starting to see the wines actually start to go west more. So we'll start to see more and more wines, and as small producers gain prominence, we're going to see more. But they actually produce a lot of wine, but a lot of it was consumed domestically or locally. They exported a lot to Ukraine as well. But yeah, it's an exciting wine. If I was going to throw a few just personal tasting notes out there, I always get a lot of the kind of this, like, black plum, little kind of black olive, little leathery sort of element to it. But then there's just this kind of sweet melted cherry that I think, a Morello cherry kind of thing that I think is just really really alluring. So a lot of spices too.
Definitely baking spices, and that's delicious.
Yeah,
excellent,
great.
Shall we continue?
Yeah.
All right, jumping right in.
The next one here.
This I'm not gonna lie, this was probably my favorite. Not to bias. I think we said we weren't going to try to pick favorites. It's like Sophie's choice over here with these wines. They're delicious. So this is the 2019 Bott Frigyes Olaszriesling, to pronounce it correctly. We tasted this with our rep, Eric Danch from Blue Danube, and this was just sort of a revelation for me. I'd probably tried all of 2 Olaszrieslings before this, and it's really just a phenomenal wine. And those of you who've been with us for a long time, we really do kind of reach out there as far as indigenous styles and varietals, and this really just checks all the boxes. This wine comes to us from the Muzila Hills in Slovakia, right on the edge of the river Garam, which is not too far from the Danube. The map actually on the label gives you a perfect sense of it. Right? We got the Danube and the Garan right there, and the vineyards are positioned. So we know exactly where we're tasting. This actually used to be part of Hungary before World War I, now part of Slovakia. And this wine comes to us from about 10 hectares that are developed by the namesake, Bott Frigyes, and his son, Frigyes. And this wine, it's really interesting. So the production, it actually begins with this really interesting combination of maceration techniques called the Hamburger method. And you have a layer of essentially foot-pressed grapes, and then another layer of whole cluster grapes, and then another layer on top of destemmed grapes that ferment in in the fermenter. Sometimes part of it is actually amphora fermented, but no more than a week, because the fear is that you move forward, especially with a wine like this, which is 100% natural. All the fermentations are native. There's no temperature control. There's a little bit longer aging on the lees, but this is a natural wine that ferments for about a week, and then it spends about a year in Hungarian oak. It's actually extremely difficult to perfect this method, and to not end up with VA and flaws that a lot of us are familiar with from natural winemaking. By
the way, VA is volatile acidity. That's when the acidity goes from like good wine acids, which are like tartaric acid, into acetic acid, which is vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime this wine, I would say there is a little volatility to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not excessive, but you get a little of that kind of wild tang to it. So almost a little bit of that kind of just like it adds a brightness and a little bit of that, again, the kind of citrusy sort of tang to it.
Absolutely. The color, of course, is the gold of the Danube. We were talking about a lot of treasure in this club, and I think this is definitely one of the treasures that we can hold in our hand. Just really delicious, amazing stuff. The result of good organic winemaking and skin contact, which all of us need a little bit more of in our lives. So
the grape Olaszriesling has a lot of different names. I think you may have mentioned some of the other names, but Olaszriesling, or it's actually kind of funny. On the bottle, on the front it says Olaszriesling, and then on the back it says Riesling Vlašský, which are both local names. Slovakia is there's people who speak Czech there. There's people who speak Serbo-Croatian. There's people who speak Slovakian. People who speak a lot of different languages. So a lot of times we'll get these labels and from this part of the world, and we're kind of wondering, wait, which language is this? What's the right one?
Right.
This grape is also known as Velschriesling, which is a popular grape in Austria, Czech Republic as well. It's so sometimes kind of what's in a name there is kind of important to know, because for example, we have actually a number of wines here tonight that are better or otherwise known by other names. Jeff will be talking about a Kekfrankos later, and it's always great to kind of have that diversity there.
Yeah, and I think this is a wine that's kind of cutting edge, typical of a new generation of winemakers in Slovakia as well.
It's also really like terroir driven wine too, right? Because we're talking about being at the base of these hills adjacent to the river. These are clay soils that are situated on top of volcanic bedrock, but that volcanic bedrock is also mixed in with limestone, and I mean the minerality of this. I mean, there's a very Chenin-like quality.
There's very much Chenin-like quality to it.
If I was going to make a comparison, I would definitely say something along the lines of like a Chenin Blanc. It definitely has that really kind of jump out of the glass kind of orchard fruit, a lot of kind of kind of like steely minerality on the backbone there. But I mean, this wine definitely, based because of that extra skin contact there that you were mentioning there, Dana, with that hamburger method where they kind of sandwich in different sort of macerations. You do get a little, and the native yeast fermentation, you get a little that more kind of wild expressiveness, which I think is just beautiful. From and Riesling is, again, this is a dry wine. A lot of people hear Riesling, they go, oh, it's going to be sweet,
right?
And this is a dry wine. It's something you can treat like any other dry wine. And I think it also pairs really, really nicely with food, salads, with anything that has a little bit of citrus drizzled over it. Really, really great pairing.
The acidity cutting through some fats too, right?
Like pork or anything.
Pork, delicious.
And what I love about this wine too is like it's really tied to the terroir of the country, and when the winemaker's making this, he's making it for people who understand this wine. He's not trying to make it so he can get 95 points. You know what I mean? Like this would never get 95 points. You know, like
much too cool for that.
It's too cool for that. Yeah. So like I think this is a wine that's like unique and speaks to the history of the country and the terroir of the area.
Well, Bott Frigyes, the guy is he's kind of one of those very Eastern European looking, large, uncompromising looking guys. And he's making, from what Eric Danch, the importer, told us, he's one of those guys who's making wines not for anybody, but for not for himself, but he's making the wines that he wants to make. He wants to make wines that are true to himself. And when we talk about the Jafark later, it's from the same producer. We'll see that kind of same through line there. It's a wine that's unlike any other wine because he's not listening to other people when they're saying, oh, maybe you should do this. He's like, nope, I'm going to make the wine that I want to make.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Moving right along. Number 3.
All right.
So good.
All right. Nice guys. All right, I'm gonna jump in here with this one. This 2016 nice German sounding name, Stumpf Pinceszet, as the guys mentioned, is a Kekfrankos. Kekfrankos is actually the local Hungarian name for probably best known as Blaufränkisch, is what's called in Austria. It's one of the best known grapes from Austria and actually in Germany as well, where it's called Lemberger or Limburger. And this is if you haven't tried, this wine is great, but if you haven't tried Austrian or German versions of this grape, it's definitely something to seek out. I found kind of on restaurant menus, especially if you can find a Blaufränkisch, it's always underpriced and always delicious. So it's a good grape to have kind of in your repertoire.
Mm-hmm.
The region here, Eger, it's actually kind of an interesting story about Eger. It's the Ottoman Turks invaded. As you probably got a sense from our history, this region was under assault from all sides for many thousands of years. But the Ottoman Turks invaded in 1552, and the story is that about 2,000 local townfolk from Eger held off 150,000 Turkish invaders, and the story was that the guys were drinking red wine.
Nice.
The Eger, I don't know if they're called Egerians, but the residents of Eger were drinking red wine, and it the Turks thought it was mixed with must have been mixed with bull's blood because it's invincible. So there's actually a local kind of Kekfrankos blend, which is called bull's blood.
Awesome.
From this region. So it's a long and storied history here of winemaking. The guys have been talking a little bit about the volcanic soil. So in Eger, they do have that volcanic soil, but it's also a lot of limestone. And limestone in wine tends to, kind of talk about different shapes in your mouth, and limestone tends to kind of produce a little bit more of a linear sensation and usually some kind of lift and acidity. So this wine you can definitely sense that in there, but it also has a nice full body as well. So there's a lot going on in here. This one this wine is actually we've been talking kind of about the natural non-interventionist winemaking. So same thing here. This wine is unfiltered, unfined. It's made all organic, natural, and aged for 18 months in large Hungarian barrels. So it's kind of interesting when barrel making is a whole thing, cooperage. But we most of you are probably familiar with the sensation of American oak, which has a really kind of vanilla and it's very pronounced, and especially new American oak. And then there's French oak, but then there's Slovenian and of course Hungarian oak, which tend to have especially if they're used barrels, tend to kind of give a much more subtle kind of effect to the wine. So this most of these wines I think we have are Hungarian, Eastern European oak. So yeah, I think we really love this one as well. It's got a lot of, I think, a kind of a mixture of blue and red fruit.
Mm-hmm.
So blue fruit, we're thinking like blueberry, blackberry, dark cherry, and then the red fruit's kind of cranberry, red cherry, little bit more tartness that comes with that red fruit, a little more acidity. But it has a really A lot of other kind of, I would call like secondary characteristics. So it's got some leather, a real nice earthiness.
Totally. Yeah, the earthiness, this little like vegetal kind of quality
Yeah.
to it on the nose. It's yeah, really, really neat. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
And,
kind of
it also likes a little bit of air too. So
Mhm.
if you kind of have to be a little bit patient with it, because if you have a decanter or just a water pitcher,
Mhm.
Mhm.
if you let it sit for like 20-30 minutes, the flavor will definitely change,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it'll be a little softer and more accessible.
Yeah, that's a great point too. I mean, and that's also a small little side note for a little soapbox that I always like to get on. Most of us do in the wine business, where let your wines breathe. Definitely, wines that they've been bottled up tight in the bottle for many years sometimes, and they like a bit of oxygen. So don't be afraid to pop your wines open early, even white wines. Like for example, this the Olaszriesling. That's a wine that I've tasted over the course of a couple of days, and it opens up and it actually softens up. It becomes more kind of honeyed but almost all wines will benefit from some oxygen. So maybe 30 minutes, 30 minutes if you have the time. If not, that's totally okay. A little trick that sometimes some sommeliers do behind the scenes at a restaurant is you take the bottle when you pop it open. If you wish you opened it 2 hours earlier, you put the cork back in it and you give it a few shakes, and that will actually get some oxygen in there, and it will kind of start the wine opening up a bit more, and just faster. Now it's kind of the quick and dirty method. I wouldn't necessarily do it if you have esteemed guests over, maybe.
Do it with your cork in. Don't put your thumb on
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Do is make sure the
something
cork's in.
Unless you're christening a boat or
and
something.
be careful. Yeah, listen, but yeah, oxygen is a friend to wine. Once you pop the cork, and but yeah, in this case, I definitely think this wine is great to have open for a little while.
Yeah, exactly. And as Ryan was saying, like maybe you don't want to be so aggressive if you're tasting like a 1983 Bordeaux or whatnot. But I always tell customers that like you don't need one of those aerators, like or decanter. You can just use a water pitcher. It works the same way.
Whatever you like.
Whatever you like, just as long as like you can swirl it in there, and yeah.
One thing, Jeff brought up a really interesting point about the differences in oak, right? When we're thinking about Slovenian oak versus French oak versus American oak. And one of the really neat things about oak barrels from these different regions is actually the grain structure. So if you think about, a tree that's cut in half, right? It's got the rings, which are alternating, white and black. And that's those rings actually in the oak itself impart certain flavors and qualities, right? So you're getting actually vanillins and from the white, and tannins actually from the black. The grain structure in Slovenian oak is much tighter than say French oak. So if you think about like Chablis that's been aged in French oak, we get that leesy, sort of lighter vanillins, that kind of thing. There's much less of that tight grain structure that you'd find in say Slovenian oak. I think you pick a little bit of this. This isn't too tannic at all, but it is an interesting point about about the different types of oak and how those barrels and cooperages can actually affect the flavor of a wine.
And barrel size as well. Jeff, you mentioned this, it's in large oak barrels versus small oak barrels. So obviously surface area there plays a factor. So when you have a large, 500 liter or 1,000 liter barrel or something like that, the oak impact can be more subtle and more gradual there as well. But yeah, it's great. It's a great point about the grain up there.
Yeah, and especially tight grain versus like looser grain. As if you think about, let's say if you age say a Sauvignon Blanc in a stainless steel tank, there's no oxygen exchange because it's metal. But a tighter grain barrel will have less oxygen. A tighter grain barrel and a smaller barrel will have less oxygen exchange, versus a looser grain barrel will have more oxygen exchange, and that'll open up the wines and age them differently.
To your point about oxygen, the important role it plays. For sure.
Yeah, just one more final point on this wine. We all agree there's a wine you could you may be enjoying your bottle now, but it's a wine if you had more, you could age it for at least 5 years. And again, there's a lot of factors that go into making a wine age worthy, but two of the most important are acidity and tannin. So if your wine has good acidity, that's always a good indication that it's going to last a long time, or could last a long time. And then tannin as well, because the tannins kind of serve as a preservative in the wine, and as they break down, they will break down over time, but it can allow wine to age. So if you're kind of tasting something, well, how long can I keep a wine? Getting that kind of combination of tannin and acid is really a good indication that you have a wine you can hold on to for a while, and it'll continue to mature.
Nice.
Great.
Moving on to the bonus wines.
We move on here to these two wines. Next, the Bott Frigyes Jafark.
So the next two wines, we the hardest part about putting together a club and being facetious here is tasting the wines and trying to decide.
It's a really tough job. It's really, hate doing it.
Yeah. We all hate doing it, and figuring out what wines we like. And the next two wines, we almost wanted to put the Bott Frigyes Jafark, and it was kind of a Sophie's choice of trying to either put in the Jafark or Olaszriesling, and we decided on the Olaszriesling. But the Jafark is absolutely amazing, and especially if you like the Olaszriesling, I think you'll really like the Jafark, because it's a little bit lighter. There's a little it spends Jafark is the native grape to the region. They only grow 10 hectares. Their whole vineyard is only 10 hectares. There is supernatural, no temperature control, unfined, unfiltered, and it spends 1 week on the skin. So that's what gives it that orange color. I think most of you already know this, but but what gives wines color, like red wines color, is the skin, right? So most grapes, except for a few that have a red pulp, when you cut into them, they're kind of yellowish color. And what gives red wine its red color is actually because it sits on the skins. And you can make white wines from red grapes, where you just press it really quickly, and then you take it off the skin, and then you can make a Blanc de Noir, what they call it. It's just a white wine from red grapes. So this is not an amphora wine. It sits 1 week on the skins, but what sitting on the skins gives it is it gives it a little bit more tannic structure. There's 3 sources of that tannic quality that you can get from a wine. The 3 sources are the skins, the stems, and the barrel. Oak can also give it that tannic quality. And this is just coming from the skins 1 week. So it's not too tannic, but it gives a beautiful chamomile flavor, pear. I think it's really pretty. It's going to be a little bit lighter than Olaszriesling if you had the Olaszriesling.
Yeah, not quite as like punchy and like with a little less of that volatility that we were talking about. And a little bit more of just kind of like kind of pure kind of orchard fruity sort of aromatics there from the Jafark. And so you mentioned like making a Blanc de Noir, like where you have a red a white wine made of red grapes. Jafark is a grape that you see in Slovakia and in Hungary as well, grown on these volcanic soils as in this area. But it's a wine that's often kind of can be kind of this like more densely textured sort of wine. You have this like really nice texture to it, and it's also a wine that can kind of take the place of a red wine in some situations, because it has that sort of more again, just density to it. So you do see, not in this particular case, but you see some Jafarks that are like 14.5 alcohol. They're big, massive wines. This one is, I would say, definitely, like you said, is a little on the lighter side, more kind of more aromatic. But it is a grape that you can have this kind of almost like red wine replacement for a white wine.
Yeah.
And it's really elegant, I would say.
It's definitely elegant.
A lot of times, we're thinking about, we say unfiltered, unfined, right? I mean, these are extremely clean, just bright, delicious wines. I mean,
Yeah.
So
But when we
much-
say unfiltered and fine, it doesn't mean that it's like
Right.
grainy or in texture or
Mhm.
Yeah.
or it's like, you know.
We like those too. I mean, we definitely had our fair share of those as well.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. But it's well made. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not like, okay, like I just didn't feel like finding or filter it. It's like actually
And that's
like,
the intention in the vineyard and
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
cellar,
exactly.
right? as
Yeah,
well.
really when it's unfined and filtered in this sort of way, when you see that distinction, a lot of times what they do is they will they essentially just have the wine settle out in the barrel or in tank, and then where the sediments will drop down, and then they will they'll rack the wines or transfer the wine into another tank where they'll let it settle again to let the particulate matter settle out again, so that you have a wine that then can be, you know, look clear and bright, but actually you didn't have to put it through any high pressure filtration. You're not using any fining agents like egg whites or fish isinglass or bentonite clay or things like that are commonly used to pull protein solids out of suspension faster. Also, the one downside of unfining and unfiltering is you got to wait. You have to have the time. So if you're someone who's trying to turn wines around really quick, like you know, if you have rosé that you want to get on the market in, you know, 4 months after harvest or 5 months after harvest, you need something that's going to actually do that work faster. So that's where a lot of, like, you know, a lot of times you have fining agents that get used, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with using fining or filtration, but, you know, sometimes in wines that don't have it, you can get maybe a little bit more of this kind of raw, kind of pure element to it that can be really
and different flavors. Ryan and I work with a colleague, Pietro, and basically it takes about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks for sediment to drop in a barrel.
in the cellar. At least after moving it.
After moving it. Yeah.
And this is the same process, you know, that we've talked about in the past. For those of you who were at the last event when we were talking about Georgian wines and the Qvevri fermented wines, where that natural, you know, sedimentation of those solids making their way to the bottom, you know. But again, as you said, it takes time, right? It takes time. It takes attention. But the result is, you know, is beautiful.
Great.
All right.
And I think the next wine we have,
The final
wine. I mean, we were so excited about this wine, but unfortunately, there were only 2 cases of it available
In the entire state.
In the entire state of California.
We tried our best to source it from every corner we could get it.
Yeah.
But, So I can jump in on the next one here. So this is the 2019 Heimann and Fiai Kadarka. It's from a region of Hungary called Szekszárd. And this is Kadarka is a grape that is a very important grape for not only Hungary, but actually for basically all of Eastern and Southeastern Europe. It's a grape that was almost extinct at a point. And then I forget how many hectares it was. It was, you know, a minuscule amount of vines that were left. And they, from those vines, they've propagated it out in the last 100 years or so, back out to become one of the most popular, but also important grapes in Hungary and in Eastern Europe. It's a grape that can be made in a variety of styles. So today here we have this wine that you can look at the color. It's like a cherry red color. It's like lighter than Pinot Noir color. You know, I've seen rosés that were marketed as rosé that are darker than this. So in terms of skin maceration, it's a very short amount of time. But you can make Kadarkas that are dark and they're burly and they have a lot of tannin and they can be big, kind of monstrous, massive wines. This obviously is not that. But we just absolutely fell in love with this wine because it's so unique. It reminds us of, maybe it's like a you know, Pinot Noir. I think we wrote the Pinot Noir that got lost in Eastern Europe, because there is this kind of exotic sort of spice and roses sort of element to it. It's definitely a wine that you could chill down a little bit great for like those, you know, hotter and hotter summer nights that we're going to be getting soon. And it's definitely aromatic, a little delicate, but there still is a nice backbone of acidity and tannin to it that it can stand up to food. But it's you get a lot of kind of like really kind of pretty and just kind of like just really keeps your nose in the glass sort of aromatics to it. It's made, so Heimann and Fiai is sons, so it's kind of like a feast if you're French, but is a producer that's they've been around for a while, but they're kind of I would say sort of reinventing themselves. On the front label, actually, they have a picture of their their winery. And as they make as they make additions to it, they will be updating the label and say, oh, we bought a new press, as we put the new press in there. Or we have a new friend who's helping us out, and they put a little drawing of him on there. So the label is kind of one of these fun little works in progress that I think is very cute.
I like the Bauhaus style. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really
And the new
It's like a record
kids as
label.
well.
As the new generation comes in, they're
yeah.
going to be put on the label as well. So it's kind of an ever evolving process, which really reflects the place of this grape in this kind of resurgence, new generation of winemakers in this part of Hungary, but really in Eastern Europe in general. As Eastern Europe, all these wines, obviously Eastern European, as Eastern Europe kind of comes again into its own after hundreds, if not thousands of years of sort of obscurity, relative obscurity in the wine world. I think there's really a lot of excitement about this region. There's a lot of talk about this kind of being the golden age beginning of Eastern European wines, and I think wines like this that really, I mean, it's hard to find wines like this elsewhere because people over there are taking risks. They're making really unique, interesting wines, and that's part of what was so exciting when we dove into the topic of Dacia and we started looking at what wines were available. Like, wow, there's a huge diversity here and a huge amount of interesting, in this case, young producers who are really kind of pushing the envelope
and passionate.
Well, Ryan, you lean pretty heavily into kind of what happened in this region. I mean, we're talking about so many different geopolitical shifts, even in the last 100 years, and how what we're experiencing is this resurgence and emergence from Soviet influence and stuff. I thought maybe you might say some thoughts about that and the politics of the region too.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, so definitely there were hundreds of years of Ottoman Turkish. I mean, we don't have to go back thousands of years to the end of the Dacian the Dacian kingdom. There we can go a little bit more recent, but the Ottomans basically came through. Essentially prohibited wine. Wine was in the Dark Ages, if you will, in that part of Europe. Very little development there. Very little consumption and progress there. Up until the kind of literally late 1800s, early 1900s, experienced a little blip up. And then, of course, 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, communism comes in, collectivization. Not to say that wine was, say, prohibited, but it was put in such a place where economically it was a commodity. It was something that was produced for for communist import export sort of control economy, not something that was produced as a kind of a passion project, something tied to the culture necessarily. I'm sure there was lots of people still producing their native heritage varieties, but it wasn't being marketed. You couldn't get it outside. It's for local consumption. Exactly.
Yeah. Versus something that's
like
going to
your
go
family,
from the center, from the periphery to the center. Yeah.
So you're just seeing actually really, again, like T mentioned earlier, kind of where Greece was maybe 20, 25 years ago, where people thought of it as just Retsina and just kind of like poorly made, internationalized wines. Now Greece is a powerhouse becoming again on the scene. We're seeing that with Eastern Europe as well. So it's a really, really fun time. To see some of these countries come out from under the thumb of communism. And I mean, I would say Hungary, Slovenia, Slovakia, and to a lesser extent, and Croatia, but to a lesser extent, Slovakia. But these countries are kind of at the forefront. Places like Romania are really still kind of, I would say they're still struggling because they've kind of leaned so hard onto the collectivization of vineyards. Really, some of those countries, they have 90% of the vineyards are controlled by 10 owners in certain situations. So but that is changing. There's definitely a new generation that's coming,
and you're gonna be you're gonna see these wines in Michelin star restaurants.
They're already there.
They're already there.
Yeah.
So I think that's just exciting. That these new young wine directors and bring these wines in and to like pair them with innovative food.
Yeah, and not just Michelin star restaurants. You're going to see them in your local grocery store, where you're going to start seeing things like, oh, it's a Hungarian Kekfrankos. That's not something you would have probably seen 10, 15, 20 years ago at all. And it's going to be something that since the export market has developed, the palates have developed of consumers as well, and so there's going to be a resurgence, and so it's a really exciting time.
Totally. And the embargo right now on French wines, of course, is going to probably have a little bit of a blip, a little bit of an impact in terms of the tariffs that are being
not full embargo, but as someone who worked in importing French wine when those tariffs went into effect, it was challenging to know where we're going to go next when things are going up 25% and another 25%. But there's a lot of countries that were either non-EU countries or that weren't affected by the tariffs that were looking at the American market and going, oh boy, it's our time. Now the time. It's the time. Yeah. So yeah.
Great. Well, I guess at this point we sort of open it up for any questions or discussion if anyone has any questions about.
Also, if you guys like any of these wines, we're happy to ship you if you're interested in purchasing the Jufark or the Kekfrankos, just send an email to us and we're happy to send it out in the next few weeks.
And act fast before we drink it all. I just want to throw that out there too.
So there's a risk there. I would say. No, it's but yeah, as I got up there on the slide there, so we had the prices there, and then for anything that you're interested in grabbing, we can ship it in the next couple of weeks, and also just to say thanks for attending tonight and being a club member. There'd be a 15% discount on anything that off of those prices there that you ordered just to say thanks for attending tonight.
15% off your total order. Yeah.
So if there's any questions, any burning questions about either Dacian history or anything like that.
Decibelus.
We did Decibelus, about the falx, the weapon of the Dacians that we have a little side note on, or just even anything about just what we talked about tonight or otherwise.
Feel free to unmute yourself and
join the
or put it in the chat, and Jeff,
or put it in the chat, whichever you prefer.
Can take care of that there.
A question from Eloise.
Yeah, can you guys read that? So I'll read it out. So I'm wondering if the grape in the Olaszriesling is the Riesling that most of us are familiar with.
So Olaszriesling is actually, it's different. It's a grape called.
It's a great question.
That is a great question. It's a grape called Welschriesling. So it's Welsch, I believe that's how it's spelled. Then Riesling, so Welschriesling. It is a different cross, a different strain of Riesling. So there's actually Riesling has been used kind of in by grape scientists and people who are doing hybrids, as a pretty commonly to be used to create new grapes. So they use it, you cross Riesling with something else and come up with something new. So and the Germans and Austrians, for a variety of reasons, but they're especially prolific with creating hybrids of different grapes. Welschriesling, I believe, is a hybrid. I don't remember what's crossed with. Actually, off the top of my head right now. But it is one of those grapes that was discovered effectively by hybridization there. But it's not the same as the Riesling that we all know and love. It's a different Riesling, and there are actually many varieties of Riesling that have something Riesling in their name, but it's not necessarily the same as just the typical kind of noble Riesling, as we would call it. But yeah, great question. There was one other point, just in case anyone is coming up with their question, that I wanted to mention. There's about kind of like where Dacia went, and like what are the historical remnants of Dacia that we can kind of still see today.
Definitely.
We obviously touch on things like the treasure and some of these archaeological sites that are still being excavated. So Sarmizegetusa is one of the sites that was the capital that's still being kind of excavated slowly today. But one interesting thing that I think is important, because probably the most really the most kind of recent and relevant use of Dacian culture and heritage in history was actually during the reign of Nicolae Ceausescu in Romania. Some of you may remember Nicolae Ceausescu, totalitarian, authoritarian, communist dictator of Romania up until his execution by firing squad. But he invoked Dacian imagery, culture, symbolism in order to build his cult of personality. And I think I'm kind of waiting for Romania to take back this Dacian imagery, because it's kind of, sadly, it's kind of been not tainted, but co-opted by him. And so I think they're still hesitant to sort of dive back into that.
Although the tourism board definitely uses Dacian history as a reason to go to Romania, as for as on holiday or something.
Absolutely, yeah. But there is a kind of a strong debate, though I know today, amongst scholars in in Romania about well, are we Dacian, or are we actually is our heritage from Romans? Because there's Romania, there actually were Romans who settled there after Dacia essentially fell, and so there actually is kind of this debate there where like, oh, are we Dacian derived, or are we a Roman derived people? And I think the debate still continues today, but you're right, see, like they do use, because there's monuments and like imagery, but there definitely still is kind of this they're breaking away from kind of where it was used in these sort of totalitarian sort of usages there, but so Dacia's still with us today.
Indeed.
Yeah, and the Romanian language is a Latin-based language. It's a Romance language. So.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's actually, I mean, I was reading that it's one of the languages potentially like most closely related to Latin. Like, so Jeff, how's your Romanian?
Yeah, how would that?
But it was isolated. It was isolated. It's actually, it's unclear whether there was kind of a direct link there, whether the legions, Roman legions who were stationed there, that descended from them, or whether it got reintroduced later on. It's actually not 100% clear, but it's really isolated, because you have a bunch of countries in between Italy and Romania. So anytime you have like a kind of like with Quebecois in Canada, I mean, that's closer to the French that was being spoken 400 years ago than it is to modern French in France, right? So you isolate a language group, and then you end up with you end up with a kind of like a fossilized version of the language. So that, my understanding is, I don't know any Romanian actually, but that's my understanding, is that it is kind of a fossilized version of that.
It's a good point, right, Jeff? Because I mean, we sort of took it all the way through Decebalus, and then the Romans, kind of taking over. But I mean, the Roman, what is that? Oh, there's Roman Dacia, right? I mean, we're talking about centuries and centuries of cross-pollination, and I mean, would you think that's when the linguistic sort of parallels would happen, like that kind of bleed in, or?
Sorry, go one more time, Dana.
Oh, just after the fall of Decebalus, and we kind of talk about this in the club, and Trajan, and I mean, there are hundreds of years of Roman influence following that we didn't really kind of get to in the club, right? So would that be the period in which you'd see the sort of Romanization of, or like the Dacian language being taking on more of like a Romance language, or?
Yeah, it's unclear whether they like how firmly entrenched that, like, I mean, because you see it in Gaul, right, where the Romans conquered Gaul, and then French is basically Latin, became the dominant language there. But the Romans pulled out of they pulled out of Dacia in the 3rd century, right, AD. So there wasn't that kind of long-standing. So as far as we know, there wasn't really a long-standing like Roman presence there. So it is interesting that it kind of entrenched itself and didn't get, you didn't pull back with when the Romans pulled back, where which happens basically everywhere else, that the Romans went in, or the Greeks for that matter, right? You look at like the Greek Empire, and I mean, So yeah, it is it's not a topic I'm like an expert on, but from what I understand, it's not a settled, there's no settled answer to how Romanian, the Romance language Romanian persisted in that area.
Oh,
Yeah.
Interesting. That's
I think that just kind of brings up one final point. I know we're getting close to time here, so I know if some folks have to jump off. But at one point that I wanted to bring up is that this really is kind of an understudied subject. This is definitely in history something that is not a kind of darling topic that has hundreds of theses about it and tons of books written. And that was something that really kind of drew us to it, was when we were started examining it. It's like, wow, there's really a lot to unpack here. And as Dana mentioned, like we basically end the story in 120 something AD, I believe, and after Trajan goes in and essentially conquers formally Dacia, but
monumental.
But yeah, it was I think I could speak for all of us here. It was a really exciting topic to kind of start diving into and say, wow, there's really so much unknown here. Totally. I mean, just to speak of, and the sources are, as Jeff can attest to, we were talking about this the other day, is the sources are really they're few, and so it's to be able to kind of piece together what the history is a challenge, and it was a fun and like deeply interesting undertaking. So thanks for coming along with us on this, because it's definitely not a topic that a lot of folks know about, and we're glad to share with everybody,
especially through the lens of wine. And I think there's a lot of territory that we still have to cover. So yeah, we might be picking up on some of those topics in future clubs, and we haven't even gotten into Tokai and some amazing varietals. So stay tuned as always. Just really
and as the team mentioned earlier, again, these wines all available for sale. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to ship them out again with the 15% discount there. And
we also have a. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
We were going to throw out too that we are actively trying to grow, and if you know anybody that is interested in joining us on this adventure and moving through these wines, we're actually going to be able to give a $25 discount on your next club if you sign up a member. So that's something that we're excited to kind of bring to this core group that's been with us from the very beginning. As always, we're really excited to see all these faces online tonight. I see a lot of people from Washington and a lot of people from around the world, and well, at least the States, but we'll get there.
And we hope to visit you guys soon and do another event.
Some stuff in tasting with all these smiling, unmasked, vaccinated faces. And we'll get you out here.
At least two things happening, I think, in California this summer, 2 live events. So we'll sign that, and I think Washington State is probably this next step. So we'll
Jeff, we're talking July for those events, right? Late July.
Yeah. Nothing finalized yet, but
we'll keep everybody posted on those fronts.
Yeah. Great. Well, were there any more questions that anyone was sitting on that we either didn't see? I don't know, Jeff, is there anything that I can't see for you, anything in the chat, anything? If there's any last questions, we are more than happy to answer to any just quick notes or anything.
We're always available at info@ancientwineguys.com. So shoot us your questions, your requests. We haven't done weddings and bar mitzvahs yet, but
we're open to it.
We're open to it, and if you're looking for anything in particular, just let us know, and we're happy to help find it for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What's the face on the stone mountain that you use in the?
So that is an image of Decebalus that was actually carved by. It's in Romania and along the river. I can't blanking, of course, on the name, but in the inscription there it reads Decebalus Rex, so King Decebalus. But it was just such a marvelous image that as soon as I saw it, I was so drawn to it. But just to have as kind of this emblem, because it really kind of speaks to the kind of the national heritage that they derive from Decebalus and from Dacia, 2,000 years prior, because I believe that was carved in the last 100 years.
Mm-hmm. Was that on the
I-
Garam River? Or was
Yeah,
that-
I didn't know that's on the Kram River. It's in I believe in central or west in the Orashtia Mountains in I think in western Romania. If I
Such a
remember.
cool.
Yeah,
It's a,
closer to Sarmizegetusa. Yeah.
such a
Yeah.
striking piece of
Mm-hmm.
piece of art for sure. Yeah.
Thanks. Is there any noteworthy sites for Dacia that tourists would go to, like what you find in Rome and Greece? And
So Sarmizegetusa Regia is the name of the kind of the historical capital of Dacia, and it was essentially kind of the mountain fortress that you'll sort of see written about, where from where Decebalus ran, and I believe Burebista as well ran the kingdom of Dacia. It was kind of the center of Dacia. It's a site where a lot of the Dacian gold was excavated from in terms of the later archaeological excavations. But Sarmizegetusa Regia is a well-known and well kind of established tourist site for Dacia. They have I believe it's like an arrangement, kind of circularization of sunstones or sort of sun altar there, because actually the Dacian culture was actually revered this sort of semi-mysterious god called Zalmoxis. And so there you find these kind of references to this Dacian religion that isn't really well written about, because it was sort of kind of not erased from history, but just not well documented of all of the rituals and the sites that were dedicated to this god and to this religion. But there is one of these kind of sort of sun, I guess you would say sun altars at Sarmizegetusa. But that's probably the most famous one, probably the most official one as well, from if you travel to Romania.
Unfortunately, the site is, I believe it's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but it's prior to that, it was actually looted pretty heavily in the 1970s and 1980s. And that's where a lot of, like, when you see these iconographic, or these iconic, I should say, Dacian wine bowls, and there are a number of
Bracelets.
different bracelets. Yeah, these incredible coiled bracelets. Those are coming out of, hoards, which is really interesting, because there are actually a number of these hoards that were found, which really speaks to the history of, Trajan coming and attacking the city. People actually buried all of their gold, not just Decebalus in that famous example, right, where he, moves the river and buries everything. Normal people were doing it too. But unfortunately, in the 80s and 90s, a lot of that stuff has hit the art market, and much of the provenance. I mean, we know where it came from, right? It came from, now I think it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and maybe we'll get out there at some point. That'd be really a fantastic trip. It's
It'd be a great trip. Yeah, future ancient wines club trip. There's rumblings about maybe down the line.
Greece or Georgia. So
Also, stay tuned. We're going to try to take some of you with us. So that's something we have in the works. Probably Georgia. So we've talked to some of you guys about that. We're excited to be partnering.
More
with
on that to come.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a great question.
All right, everybody. Well,
Great. We'll sign up. And again, if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to just shoot us an email. Or send us a text. Most of you have our phone number, probably.
if you haven't checked out the updated website, by all means, go to www.ancientwineguys.com. You can see this guy's fantastic work. Updating the site, and there's a lot of information there about the club and everything we're doing. And
we're totally looking forward to seeing you all soon. So
definitely on a personal note, looking forward to seeing everybody in person here at some point. We picked up on the island here for 2 years, so but yeah, it's fun to see all you three in one place too. So
we miss you, man. We'll get you out here. Yep. Or we'll come to you.
Yeah.
We will.
Thank you. Yeah. So.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing this adventure with us, and we'll check in with you. We'll probably see you before, but we'll definitely check in with you for the next one of these.
This will be an ongoing thing for every club. So we'll see you next time, if not sooner.
So looking forward to seeing all of you, and as the newest Ancient Wine guy, I'm proud to be here, and I'm looking forward to getting to know each and every one of you, and going forward, it's it's great to be here.
Yeah. To that. So before we
To
close
the-
out, cheers to each and every one of
Every
you.
one of you.
Exactly.
And,
So cheers to everybody. I hope
And
you're enjoying the wines.
wines and
I hope
and
you enjoy the
club.
history and the write-ups and yeah.
We'll
Have
see you
a
next time.
great Memorial Day weekend.
Enjoy, everybody.